This episode is made possible by the generosity of our listeners. Thank you.
Welcome to the Creation Science
for Kids
show. How long were Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden? Who was the serpent that spoke to Eve? We've come to the beginning of the drama of humanity and the biggest bad guy in all of history. Then we explore what science reveals about a meat diet and finish up with my favorite experiment of all. Praise the Lord. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart, in the company of the upright, in the congregation. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Full of splendor and majesty is his work, and his righteousness endures forever. He has caused his wondrous works to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and merciful. Psalm 111, verses 1 through 4. This is episode 59 of the podcast where we learn about Jesus, our Creator, and his amazing world. Hi, I'm Sherry Fields, your host, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Joseph.
Hello.
And Samuel.
Hi.
To follow along with what we're looking at, check out the show notes, creationscience4kids.com/serpent. All right, we're up to Genesis chapter 3, the saddest chapter in the whole Bible. But we've got to get through it because this has important stuff about who we are, who God is, and what the world is really like. Would you please read verse 1 for us, Joseph?
Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree in the garden?
So, who is this new character that we're reading about?
Satan.
Yeah, we do figure that. Why? What is it about what he does that says this isn't just a snake? Because that's what serpent means. It's an old word for snake. How do we know it's Satan? Do you know?
No.
Yeah, it's a little...
It can talk.
Yeah, it can talk. Very good. If you ever read Humpty Dumpty, how do you know it's an egg? There's nothing in the words there in that nursery rhyme that says this is an egg. But when somebody draws a picture of Humpty Dumpty, they always draw it as an egg. We've known for hundreds of years what Humpty Dumpty is, even though there's nothing in the nursery rhyme that tells us that. It's not quite that subtle where it's just, well, everybody knows it. It's more obvious than that. In fact, when you go in other places through the Bible, there are some verses that say pretty much straight out how we know this serpent isn't just a regular snake, but that it is the devil or Satan, which means the adversary, the bad guy. Let's look all the way at the far end of the Bible. Revelation 12:9 says, And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. This very straight out says he's not only a serpent, but also a dragon. That's how he is usually described in Revelation. But he's tying it together saying this is that serpent, which has the name of devil and Satan and who deceives. Because we can already see the very first thing he said is to say, is God a big meanie not letting you eat of every single tree? And then Jesus said also in John chapter 8, verse 44, he's talking to the Pharisees and how wicked they are. And he says, Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. We see from the very first thing the serpent says to Eve and continuing on, he is lying. So we know it must be the devil because he's the one who started lying. And also in 1 John chapter 3, verse 8, I'm going to read in the Message because it's so clear the way he puts it there. Those who make a practice of sin are straight from the devil, the pioneer in the practice of sin. The Son of God entered the scene to abolish the devil's ways. If someone is a pioneer in something, what does that mean?
The leader.
The leader? And a leader does what?
He leads.
How else could you say?
Everyone follows what he says, so he is just like, he's the main person that everyone respects and follows.
Yeah, in American history, we had a bunch of pioneers. What were they doing? Why do we call them pioneers? Do you know?
No.
They went out first. When there were no towns, when there were no roads, they took their wagons with everything they would need to survive and to start a new life, and they pioneered a new land that had been just used by the nomadic Native Americans and lots of wild animals. To be a pioneer means you go out first, where no one else has gone. And yes, often pioneers are followed. As we know, the devil was followed. So we know both from who the devil is and then what he's doing. He certainly had sinned before Adam and Eve did, because he's starting off casting doubt on what God said and messing around with Eve's mind. We know she was deceived, and we'll get into that more later. But that is what the devil did. So we got to back up a little bit now that we know it's the devil. How long do you think it was between the sixth day when God made Adam and Eve and Genesis chapter 3, where the serpent talks to Eve and she is deceived and we all fall that day? How long do you think that was?
At least a week.
Why?
Because if it was a year, then Eve would have figured out that this couldn't have been one of the animals that God made.
Ooh, I had never thought of that. That's a great idea.
She would have seen all the animals and seen that none of them could talk.
Right.
But she was still getting used to it, so she thought, oh, God must have made this, so I'm going to listen to it.
That's a really good point. Although when Balaam's donkey talked to him, he had lived in the world that we know for a long time and had never run into a talking animal before.
He wasn't in his right mind.
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
Mad.
So that's a good point. Eve would still have been naive enough to not be surprised by a talking snake.
Yep.
Any other ideas?
No.
How long do you think it was? Do you think it was a long time or a short time?
Short.
Yeah?
Like
Why?
5 days.
Okay, why?
Because if he had known that it was not one that
Same
God
reason Joseph?
created,
Mm-hmm.
she wouldn't have listened to it.
Yeah. No, we do know the snake itself is real. The way God curses it there when he comes and talks to them all. So it was a real animal that the devil was using. Yeah, but I remember thinking about this and saying, well, for all we know, it could have been a long time. I've heard people say, well, maybe it was several years between when God created Adam and Eve and when they fell. But when you think about it, that would not work. It had to be a short time. And yeah, I think your point is great, Joseph. Also, what had God told Adam and Eve to do?
Not to eat the tree.
Right. They were told not to, but they were also given lots of things to do so they wouldn't get bored. What were they supposed to do?
Name all the animals.
No.
Name the animals. That was that first day. Mm-hmm.
To till the ground?
Take care of the ground. Uh-huh. And what else?
I don't know.
Okay. It's been a while since we were in Genesis 1, so let's back up and look at it again. Verse 28 is when he's just created people. God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So they were supposed to be in charge of the earth, and they were also supposed to
Have kids.
have kids. Was there anything wrong with Adam and Eve's body? No. Would there have been anything stopping them from obeying God's command to have children? No. Had they had children before they sinned? No. That by itself tells us this had to be a very short time, because it does not take long for very healthy married couples to start having children. So that tells us it had to be a short time. I heard one guy, and this is something that is just in the apocryphal kind of stuff, but it makes an interesting idea, that maybe the idea that Friday the 13th is a bad day could go all the way back to the beginning, that it was 13 days after creation week started. I have no idea, but the 13th day out. So, and I think that works out to a Friday because he blessed the seventh day and that was Saturday. Anyway, He's like, well, it makes sense, but I would need to see some sound evidence, and the Bible says nothing about it. So it doesn't really matter. We just know it had to be short for all of these reasons, that it was not very long. Here's another thing. So let's go back to the devil. At this point, he has already sinned. He is going to deceive Eve and mess the whole thing up. But if you remember at the end of day 6, when God was all finished making everything, including people, what did he say about his whole creation?
It was good.
Not just good. It was
Very good.
Yeah,
very good. And the angelic beings, all the spiritual beings, both the angels who stayed good and those who fell with Satan, that became demons, are part of creation, even though we don't see them and it's not described in detail where they are created. They are part of creation. They are not eternal beings. So we're pretty sure that when God said, my creation is very good, at that point, the devil was still Lucifer. He was still in charge of worship and had not yet fallen. That is something that wise people studying theology have just figured out based on other passages of Scripture, but it makes a lot of sense. Now, there's one thing here. Look at this word that my spell check doesn't even recognize the King James spelling. Subtle. We spell it differently nowadays. What does that word mean?
Sly?
Sly. And what's sly? If somebody or something is sly, what are they like?
They're very easy to trick you.
Yes, they're tricky. Now, this is interesting. I wanted to see what it was in the Hebrew. And Hebrew tends to take ordinary, everyday meanings and then use it for the ideas out there, the things that are not concrete. So the word subtle in Hebrew means to be bare, to be smooth, which is fascinating to think of because a serpent has no hair. It's slippery and smooth, even when it's dry. So you can see why it's such a perfect word to describe a serpent. And it also has that same idea of to be sly and cunning. We've got kind of that idea in English too. In the thesaurus for the word cunning, it had as some of the synonyms that mean nearly the same: smooth, slick, slippery. So we even use, if somebody is a slippery person, you dare not trust them. They're going to try to get away from you with their thinking or deceive you somehow, which is really cool to think about. But you can see why the serpent was so good at figuring out what would appeal to Eve and that she was willing to listen to, because he was so slippery. And there's one more verse that I wanted to mention. In 2 Corinthians 11:3, Paul is talking to the people at Corinth and saying, "But I fear lest by any means," that means he will try all different tricks, "as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ." None of us dare trust ourselves. Our minds are too easily corrupted, just like Eve's was. We have to trust God as she was supposed to, and we have to depend on him, because our enemy, the devil, Satan, the adversary, is the slipperiest, most cunning being there ever was. Well, I knew this was coming up. I've known this for over 2 years, but we have to cover it anyway. So I was looking for something for the middle and got my new Creation Matters from Creation Research Quarterly. And looking through that, most of it is for scientists by scientists. And right in the middle is something by Dr. Jean Lightner, one of my favorite lady creation scientists, partly because I like all the ladies and partly because I love what she studies. She loves to study how things mutate and change today, recognizing that God created them that way, but that he did not have to create Dalmatians at the beginning. So she has a whole article here on whether dogs and other animals, but particularly dogs, were created to eat meat. Because they have a little thing actually about what Dr. Jerry Bergman, who has probably written more creation books than anyone else alive on the planet, So Dr. Jerry Bergman had a dog that was getting older and was having trouble with all kinds of health things. So they said, what you need to do is feed it a raw meat diet, lots and lots of animal products, and even raw eggs. And sure enough, when he did that, his dog's health cleared up. He became much healthier. But his dog was 12 years old. And one of the things that they realize is it's not because that's the way dogs were designed originally, was to eat a bunch of meat, but because his dog was getting older and had trouble digesting it from other sources. So giving him the easiest to digest for him was a healthy thing. So that got them thinking. And first, Dr. Leitner starts out with what the world tries to say. And they say things like pandas started out as carnivores and then lost the ability to eat meat and switched over to bamboo, which is what they almost always eat. What does the Bible tell us? What did everything eat before the flood?
Grass.
Grass and other
Fruits.
all kinds of
Plants.
Everything from T-Rexes to lions to humans to dogs to pandas were all totally vegetarian at the beginning. Where the world says, oh, no. Lots of things have to eat meat because that's the way evolution has developed them, and we need to go back to that original. We come at it from two very different assumptions. Then you have things like Dr. Bergman's dog doing so much better on a meat diet. Why? So that's what Dr. Leitner was talking about. First of all, nothing has to have a certain kind of diet. We've talked about the lioness that her favorite food was spaghetti, and they had to spend quite a while as they were reintroducing her to the wild in Africa to get her to finally eat meat because she only wanted to eat spaghetti. And that was just with tomato sauce, not meat sauce. So here's some ideas we have on, yeah, it is really cool, on what could be going on. First of all, we all have microbes inside of us. We've taken probiotics. Lots of people do that because whenever you have an antibiotic, it kills all the bacteria and good stuff that's inside your digestive system, and then you need to put it back. And depending on what's in there, you can have trouble digesting if you don't have the right things. There's a cool bit here. Okay, so now this is talking about cows, but they were living in an area that had this legume, leucaena, I think is how you pronounce it. It's a small tree that was poisonous to them. They would actually get sick and even die until they got the right microbe that helped them break down the stuff that was a toxin. And they didn't get better at digesting, but they picked up this, it doesn't say whether it was a bacteria or what, that would help break it down for them. And now it's great for them to grow on. They eat it and they're happy and healthy just because of the microbe inside of them. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, here's some other thoughts that is a little harder to study out how it would work. But based on that, we can guess that, first of all, there would have been more microbes before the flood when everything was healthy and the environment was beautiful. Another thing that I've thought of, and lots of others have as well, we know there are lots of plants that went extinct that did not survive the flood. Those plants could have had valuable nutrients that we no longer have access to, that needed just the right kind of climate that no longer exists, or for whatever reason they ended up getting all eaten and not having seeds. The other thing that happens to us is mutations. There are signs in our DNA that we used to be able to create our own vitamin C, that we didn't need to have to eat it, and that what makes the vitamin C has broken. One of the things vegans, people who eat nothing from animals, have a lot of trouble getting vitamin B12. That is possible. At the beginning, we were able to produce our own vitamin B12 without having to eat it from other animals. So there are all kinds of things that we can say, well, it makes sense and it's easy to see how it could work. And we also believe that ever since Adam and Eve sinned, things have been breaking down, wearing out, and getting harder to work. And that certainly makes sense of why God told Noah and his family when they got off the ark, now you may eat meat. I know my family, we have trouble with all the legumes that our system does not like them. It makes our stomachs upset. And some of us can't eat peanuts and beans. We can't do that. And that's one of the main sources for protein if you're a vegetarian. So if you have trouble with that, you're in big trouble if you can't get meat. So I'm very grateful that we and Dr. Bergman's dog can have meat now, but it didn't have to be that way in the beginning. We are far, far from the Garden of Eden today. And that's kind of sad, but it's cool to think about how God could have done it back then and what it will look like again when Jesus comes back and restores everything.
Yep.
Yay!
All right, now we're going to share some experiments we've done. Okay, Samuel, so what was the experiment that you worked on? For Christmas, your grandpa had given
Joseph a snap circuit set.
Okay, and what do you do with a snap circuit set?
You build stuff.
Like Legos?
Sort of.
Okay, so they're plastic pieces that you don't have to worry about electrocuting yourself.
No.
And what do you do?
You build them to make sort of stuff like you can make a light.
Okay, so first you have to get what didn't come with the set that you have to find in the drawer? Batteries, because it's
Battery operated.
So what is it that this toy is teaching you?
It is teaching you the basics of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a person who designs all the circuits.
Right, and we're an electrician. Mm-hmm.
Then that would be good for you because it's just allowing you to help practice.
Right. Yeah, it was a fairly expensive set. That's why Grandpa had gotten it. But it allows you to see how a circuit works without frying yourself or your house down. So what was it you did? What was it that you made it do?
Do a song.
Okay, so it had where you could plug it in and it had a speaker that would play
Happy Birthday.
Happy Birthday. So what did you have to do? Did you just flip the switch and it played Happy Birthday as soon as you took it out of the box?
No.
Mm-hmm.
I had to put the stuff on the board, and then once I built it all...
Okay, so did you just have to run the pieces from the battery pack around to the speaker? Is that all you had to do?
No.
You have to make a continual loop from the box back to the box.
Right. Yeah, so you have to have a wire not only coming from the battery, but also going back to the battery.
There was also a light.
Yeah.
So I figured out that if you don't have the switch where you just flick it on to the on, and then the light comes on, if you replace that with just a regular, standard circuit
piece,
that the light will be on
all the time,
no matter what.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, it's interesting. Last night at church, we were talking about living life, we're using God's power rather than trying hard on our own because it's so exhausting. It's kind of like having one battery that you get at the beginning of your life and you can recharge it a bit when you sleep, but still you're working on one little battery while you're trying to do something huge, which is a Christian's life. Christian life is way bigger than we were designed to do on our own. And I was thinking about electricity because somebody had mentioned you got to plug in to the outlet. The power is all there. And I also was thinking, now it'd be too dangerous for that toy set. But if you've got something touching the wires and corroding it and messing it up, causing heat and stuff, you can totally fry the circuit. And that's a bit what sin is like. So it's cool to think that electricity and learning how those circuits and all work can help us think of spiritual analogies too. God loves science. The more we understand about what he made and how he made it, the more we can picture what he is like and let his power flow through us. Okay, now it's time for my favorite experiment of all, because I don't really like science experiments. They are messy and unpredictable. But there's one that I really, really like. What was it that we did?
We got cold water. And we also got hot water, and then we put food coloring in it, and then we watched to see which one would put all the food coloring around. faster.
would be blended in the fastest. When we dropped a bit of food coloring into the boiling water, what happened to the food coloring almost right away?
It almost all the way went blue.
Yeah, it was a blue food coloring because we could see it. And it did not take more than, about 15, 20 seconds?
Yes.
To get all the way. And this was still water. I hadn't stirred it. So I'd let it stand there for, about a minute. And it did not take long. What about the cold water? How long did it take for the food coloring to get all mixed in with every part of the cup?
More than 10 minutes.
Yeah, it did. And what I love about this experiment, besides that it works perfectly every time and isn't messy, it's so pretty. That blue food coloring, what did it do when it was first starting to swirl in?
There was more at the top, and then it looked like it dived in.
Mm-hmm. And it made like little fingers and whorls. What does it let you see as the food coloring is moving around? What is it that's causing it to blend in? Because since we weren't stirring it, everything in the world is moving. Every atom is moving. Absolute zero is defined as the point at which the atoms themselves would be holding still. Nothing in the universe is at absolute zero. Everything is wiggling a little bit. Ice, the whole world. The hotter something is, the faster its molecules are moving around. That's why the food coloring got moved around faster in the hot boiling water, and why it took so long in the cold water. That's the difference. It itself is moving more slowly. So you can see with that why, when you want to brew some tea, would you want to put the tea bag into ice water right away? No, it would take hours to get as rich and deep as you wanted, when all you have to do is take that hot water and it does the work for you. It swirls things around and pushes its way through the leaves. It's very active because it's hot.
5 minutes.
And
at least 5 minutes.
Yeah, that it depends whether you've got black tea or the herbals can take longer. But yeah, that's why we use hot water to brew the tea. Even when we're going to make iced tea with it, you still start with boiling water. So that's my favorite experiment because it's so beautiful and shows us some cool things about how the whole world works.
Don't forget, you can find links to all the things we've talked about today by visiting the show notes page. creationscience4kids.com/serpent or /059 for episode 59.
While you're there, I'd like to ask for your help. If you know someone who might enjoy listening to this podcast and checking out my website, would you let them know for us? Every article I do, including today's show notes, has share buttons to make it super easy for you to pass on to your friends on Facebook or by email. You have amazing power to help your friends find out the truth with just a click of a button.
Plus, if you want to encourage us, leaving the show a rating on the Apple Podcasts directory is a great way to do that and help families looking for new podcasts to find us. Thanks.
Has this show been a blessing to your family? Running this podcast and ministry isn't free. Plus, it takes a lot of time. We now have a Patreon account where you can help us out. If just a few of our listeners help us out, even if it's just $1 a month, it will help cover the basic expenses, and anything above that will help us improve things for the future. Visit cs4ks.com to find out how you can get involved.
Do you like science? Got a subject you want to learn about? Or maybe you like telling stories.
Remember, it's super easy to turn your smartphone into a recorder, and if you send me a report, story, joke, or interesting idea, I might use it in a future show. Head over to cs4ks.com to find out what to do.
Well, this finishes up our show for today. Until next time, have fun treasuring our amazing universe and creator.
Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Revelation 4:11.